Although the DC animated universe began with Batman the Animated Series, it could be argued that the best of this universe came from its ensemble series, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. Through these shows, young audiences had a chance to meet new heroes and villains, and see a different side of the ones they already knew. But of all these fantastic characters, which are the most heroic, which are the most evil, and which falls somewhere in between? Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Bench, and this is Justice League, Good to Evil. Now some rules before we get started. There are a ton of characters, especially in Unlimited. We can't mention everyone, otherwise we'd be here all day, but we're gonna try and hit as many as possible. Additionally, for the characters who have had their own shows, such as Batman, Superman, Supergirl, and Lex Luthor, for this list, we're only going to be looking at their actions within the Justice League series. As usual, we'll be starting with the sweetest, the most pure and noble characters and working our way down. These characters are the good. Starting off with our gold medal of good, we're giving it to Wally West, aka The Flash. Flash is the heart of the Justice League. Although he may seem goofy and carefree, Flash cares a lot about being a hero and does all he can to save the day. He'll even try to help his enemies, as we see in Flash in Substance through his interactions with the Trickster, or in the Christmas episode with the Ultra Humanite. Flash also cares about his teammates. He was willing to forgive Shyr for her betrayal and try to help her and Diana become friends again. His biggest heroic moment came at the end of Unlimited Season 2, when he was able to defeat Lex and Brainiac, nearly sacrificing himself to the Speed Force. Flash is a really great guy, with his only flaws being that he'll occasionally be unfocused. He also tried to sell out, being a spokesperson for various products, though he thankfully only did this for an episode. For our silver medal of good, we're giving it to the Dark Knight, Bruce Wayne, aka Batman. While Bats can beat Flash in terms of personality, there's no denying that Bruce cares a lot more than he lets on. This is evident through the several heroic moments that he's had throughout both series. At the end of Justice League Season 2, Batman was willing to sacrifice himself to destroy the Thanagarian's generator. He also once flew the Javelin in front of a kryptonite-filled missile to save Superman and an island of people. When Ace threatened the city, it was Batman who took the time to comfort her until she died. We also can't forget how Batman was willing to give up his dignity in order to save Diana, who had been transformed into a pig by Cersei. It was a whole thing. But given that we got to hear Bat sing, we're not complaining. While Batman can be gruff and antisocial, there's no denying that he's a true hero, especially in this series. The bronze medal of good is going to John Jones, aka Martian Manhunter. As the last of the Martians, John did what he could to assure that the Emporium would never be freed again. When it was, John took up the mantle of a superhero to protect the Earth. Although John struggles both with humanity and his own loss, he never falters. When Morgaine Le Fay promised him a fantasy world where his wife and children were still alive, John stole the Philosopher's Stone, but eventually overcame her temptation, destroying the stone. In another episode, despite being disillusioned with humanity through their petty and selfish thoughts, John still forced himself to use his powers again to find a lost girl. He also rescued each of the Justice League members from their dreams during Dr. Destiny's attack. While he may not be perfect, John is still about as noble as they come. Up next, we have Kara Kent, aka Supergirl. As a younger cousin of Superman, Kara started off being immature and overconfident, but while she could be headstrong, she still cared about being a hero. She fought in several hard battles to protect the Earth and the League's watchtower. Kara even had to fight herself when battling her clone, which was tough both physically and emotionally. We also saw how brave Kara could be when she was forced to fight without her powers against Metallo. Ultimately, Kara decided to remain in the future to be part of the League of Superheroes, knowing that she could make more of a difference with them than with the Justice League. Despite her youth, Kara truly had the makings of a great hero, and certainly proved herself throughout Unlimited. Under her, we have Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow. Ollie was an unexpected surprise in that he became even more of a hero than people would have thought, although that's not to say that Green Arrow started off bad. In his first episode, he said it himself how he cared the most about protecting the little guys. While sometimes gruff, Ollie also frequently showed his softer side to people like Black Canary and Supergirl, the latter of which he frequently helped and was always looking out for. As for Black Canary, Ollie was willing to let himself get beaten up by her mentor, Wildcat, to save him from his own fighting addiction. When it came to the Cadmus arc, Green Arrow stayed honest and never backed down from his views, even standing up to Superman. It's like Bat said, in a way, he kept the team grounded and offered a different perspective. Between his honesty, bravery, and loyalty, it's no surprise to see him this high up. Getting back to the original 7, we have Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman. Diana chose to run away from home to help protect man's world, and from there, she kept choosing to be a hero no matter the personal cost. She saved people like Princess Audrey and Steve Trevor, and had been willing to be exiled from Themyscira to save her family. As both a warrior and a princess, Diana can sometimes come off as harsh. When it looked like Superman had been killed, Diana nearly killed Toyman, only stopping when Flash intervened. Later on, during a day off, Diana was more hostile to a pair of robbers than she needed to be, just because she was frustrated. She also held a huge grudge against Shyr for the longest time, although we can't blame her much for that. We also have to give Diana points for still freeing Shyr from her prison on the Thanagarian ship, despite her anger. Putting aside her temper, Diana is still incredibly heroic, earning her a high spot on this list. Next is another green hero, John Stewart, aka Green Lantern. As a former Marine, John is one of the most serious and sternest members of the League. He can get easily annoyed, usually with the antics of Flash, and has a temper. Given his willpower-driven abilities, John never backs down from a fight and is always beside his team throughout any battle. Additionally, despite their mess of a relationship, John still cares deeply for Shyr. Before they got together, he saved her from one of Joker's bombs, and even after the Thanagarian invasion, John was willing to forgive her. Though incredibly disciplined, he will cut loose occasionally. It may not always be easy to see John's true personality underneath his lantern persona, but he cares a lot about the people he loves. Clark Kent, aka Superman. You probably wouldn't expect to see Supes this low on our list of heroes. But again, we're just focusing on Justice League today, and while Clark may have done a lot of good in his own series, he makes iffy decisions in Justice League Unlimited, especially once Luthor decides to run for president. Paranoid and haunted by the actions of his Justice Lord self, Supes tries to stop that universe from becoming a reality again, and to stop anyone else from learning about it. He became hostile towards people like The Question, Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, and Professor Hamilton, and nearly killed Luthor when he thought that Luthor killed Flash. He doesn't, thankfully, but he clearly wants to. Superman also tried to kill Darkseid the first time that he saw him again in Justice League, but considering it's Darkseid, we can't take off too many points. Even with these occasional black marks, Superman is still a hero. He was willing to work with Luthor to stop the Justice Lords, claiming that as bad as the choice was, it was still better than the alternative. Being so powerful, Superman is also frequently seen taking the biggest hits, so his fellow heroes don't have to. He's not the Boy Scout that people like to claim he is, but even with all his not-so-great moments, Superman is still one of the biggest heroes in the Justice League. He's not as pure of heart in this incarnation, but he admits his faults and was also willing to give Shyr a second chance, which keeps him firmly in the lower half of the good tier. Nearing the end of this section, we have Mari McCabe, aka Vixen. As the second girlfriend of Green Lantern, it would have been easy to make her the jealous type or someone who was always being catty toward Shyr. Thankfully, while she doesn't get a ton of screen time, Mari gets to shine as her own character beyond just being GL's new GF. And speaking of Shyr, despite both of them wanting John, Vixen still saved Shyr from a group of Thanagarians who wanted to kill her for her betrayal. The two women clearly have respect for each other and can even be friendly with each other and joke about their romantic experiences with John. Though they still subtly competed for John's affection, there weren't any hard feelings between them. Mari also helped the other female heroes destroy Roulette's fighting ring once and for all. Overall, a cool heroine that really could have used some more spotlight episodes. Finishing off the good, we have Aquaman. Another hero with not a lot of screen time. We felt we had to give this king a mention since he was one of the first heroes we saw outside of the main 7. In his first Justice League episode, he was hostile, sinking a nuclear submarine for coming into Atlantean territory. However, he was quickly shown to not be nearly as hostile towards the surface dwellers as his brother Orm. Aquaman was willing to reflect on how his own hostility had put his family in danger, showing that he not only cares about his wife and child, but he also had the capacity to change and become an ally to the League. Aquaman only showed up a couple of times after this, still keeping his gruff attitude, but also being helpful in the fight against Icthultu. Because of this, we felt we couldn't put him any higher. That's it for the good characters, now it's time to descend into neutral territory. This is the gray area. Starting off the tier is the final member of the original 7, Shyr, aka Hawk Girl. For the longest time, she was Team Hothead, always ready for a fight, threatening someone or going into a battle head first. She did have a softer side, as seen with John, as well as with Grundy of all people. But overall, Shyr was seen as a more aggressive but still heroic member of the League. This all changed, however, when her betrayal was revealed. She had been sent to Earth as a spy and gave her people, the Thanagarians, all they would need to take over the Earth. But Shyr wasn't just doing this to be cruel. If anything, she thought that she was doing the right thing. She had a duty to her people, but once Shyr realized that her actions were going to kill everyone on Earth, she decided to betray her own people and help the League. After this, Shyr wasn't nearly as aggressive, though she was still willing to take action when necessary. Like when she helped Wonder Woman save her home from Faust, or when she put Grundy out of his misery when he was resurrected. We should also mention how she was willing to give herself up to the Thanagarians in exchange for saving Vixen's life. All these actions show clearly how much of a hero Shyr truly is, and while we can't overlook her betraying the League, we feel that she doesn't deserve to be put any lower. Next is another tragic character, Ace. Given that she's responsible for one of the biggest tear-jerking scenes in Unlimited, we just had to give her a mention. Originally a member of the Joker's Royal Flush Gang, she used her mental powers to nearly drive millions of people insane. After learning that Joker was willing to restrain her again, if necessary, Ace turned against him and wasn't seen again after her powers had grown, allowing her to warp reality. Although she threatened to inadvertently destroy an entire city through her death, Ace never really wanted to hurt anyone. She was just a lonely and scared girl, and after Batman comforted her, Ace was able to calm herself down enough so that no one would be hurt once she died. It's hard to say what Ace would have been like with a better childhood, but from what we can see, she was definitely not a villain at heart. Break out the tinfoil hats. Next is the Question. Question is a brilliant detective who specializes in conspiracy theories. His ever-present paranoia caused him to do things like go through everyone's trash and drive a car with no license plates. Not super heroic. It gets worse when we see that he was willing to kill Lex Luthor himself so that Superman didn't. Granted, he was only willing to do this to prevent a Justice Lord scenario from happening in his own timeline, but it was still attempted murder. Even so, Question has done a lot of good too. He helped Supergirl figure out the mystery behind her bad dreams, found the link between Cadmus and Lex Luthor, and was even able to stop Huntress from killing Mandragora, which led to them dating. His bravest moment came when he refused to give up any secrets about the League, even while being tortured. We still aren't sure if Question can be considered a traditional hero, but we're giving him enough leeway to keep him in the upper half of gray. Speaking of Question's girlfriend, next is Helena Bertinelli, aka Huntress. In her first appearance, Helena was kicked out of the League for trying to murder Mandragora out of revenge. Although she spared him in the end for the sake of his son, this set the precedent that Huntress was willing to work outside of the League's rules. After getting together with Question, she helped him gather intel and later rescued him from Cadmus. Her other main relationship comes from her rivalry with Black Canary, and although the two can have frosty interactions, Huntress still went out of her way to save Canary from Roulette's Glamour Slam. Though she remained an independent hero, it's easy to see how Huntress could still earn herself a new place in the League, if she really wanted one. Next is Amanda Waller. While certainly an infamous antagonist for the League, we really can't call her a villain, not in this incarnation at least. Waller was the head of Cadmus, a group focused on creating defenses that could defeat the Justice League if the League were to ever go rogue. Though she didn't trust him, Waller still worked with someone like Lex Luthor, a dangerous and foolish move indeed, and it wasn't the only foolish mistake that Waller made due to her distrust of the League. We can't forget how she launched a full-on attack against the Watchtower after she thought the League was responsible for the attack against Cadmus. Still, as dangerous as she might have been, Waller never wanted to rule the world or hurt anyone. She just wanted to protect Earth from those who she deemed were threats. We saw this when she disapproved of General Eiling's willingness to kill civilians for the sake of killing Superman. Still, even Waller has had her moments of being willing to do awful things for the greater good. Project Batman Beyond, anyone? In the end though, Waller was finally able to trust in the Justice League. working with them and proving her claims of being someone who just wanted to protect others. Really, it's her overall callousness and antagonism through Unlimited Season 2 that keeps her from going any higher on our list. Following her is the godlike robot Amazo. Created by the late Professor Ivo, all Amazo wanted was to simply find a purpose. He briefly worked with Luther and tried to destroy the Justice League, but that was more due to his naivety than outright maliciousness. After learning of Luther's betrayal, Amazo decided to give him mercy and instead chose to explore the universe, claiming that he had nothing else to learn from Earth. Several months later, Amazo returned, but surprisingly, he wasn't looking for revenge against Luther. Instead, he was confused about his own existence and wanted guidance regarding his purpose. He briefly stayed with Dr. Fate, who offered to help him find purpose, only to later teleport himself back out into the universe following a fight with Solomon Grundy. While not as tragic as someone like Ace, you really can't help but feel kinda bad for this guy. Next is yet another not-so-bad villain, the Ultra Humanite. While he was labeled a supervillain, Ultra Humanite often seemed more interested in the fine arts than taking over the world. He was often shown to be a model prisoner while in jail, and only helped Luther break out when he made it worth his while. That is until Batman made a better offer, convincing Humanite to betray Luther. Later on, we saw the Ultra Humanite help Flash with his Christmas gift to some orphans, fixing the toy that he accidentally destroyed. While Humanite will still sometimes indulge in destruction, or will occasionally team up with other villains, he's probably the most reasonable out of all the Justice League baddies. At the end of the gray tier is Hero Talik. Much like his ex-fiancée, Shyr, Hero is a bit more complicated than he may seem on the surface. Yes, obviously taking over the Earth, nearly destroying it, and trying to kill Green Lantern plant him firmly in the antagonist category. But in this case, at least, we really can't see him as a complete villain. You have to remember, Hero only did what he did to save the Thanagarians from their enemies. From his perspective, he had no other choice but to use the Earth. This doesn't justify his actions, but it does make Hero seem like more than just another interplanetary conqueror. We also saw that after the plan failed and the Thanagarians were forced to leave Earth, Hero sacrificed himself to save what remained of his people. For these reasons, we felt that we could spare him from the bad tier. Speaking of which, that wraps up the gray area. Time for the wicked and the villainous. These characters are the bad to evil. Starting off this tier is the immortal Vandal Savage. Savage ended up being one of the League's biggest enemies. He was first seen trying to take over Kaznia through murdering Kaznia's king and marrying his daughter, Princess Audrey. Had Savage succeeded, he would have gained access to an orbital railgun, which would have made him a global threat. Later in that same season, Savage used time travel to change the events of D-Day, which would have led to the Axis powers winning World War II had the League not stopped him. So that's two huge and incredibly evil plans. How in the world is he still this high up on our list? Well, that's where his final appearance comes in. When Superman is sent 30,000 years in the future, it's Savage who not only helps Supes get back home, but also gives Superman the information he needs to stop the younger Savage from killing off the human race. While this Savage was technically erased from the timeline, it was still an admirable moment for him, showing that he wasn't completely heartless or power mad. Next is Cadmus's second-in-command, General Wade Eiling. Unlike Waller, who can sometimes be reasoned with, Eiling is stubborn to a fault and outright refuses to trust superheroes and metahumans. Along with that whole nearly killing an entire island thing we mentioned earlier, Eiling also manipulated Captain Atom into fighting for Cadmus, and even transformed himself into a hulking monster, just to try and fight and defeat Superman. Simply put, Eiling only cares about his own agenda, and while he may claim that he wants to protect Earth's citizens, he really only cares about his own power. He does, however, eventually stand down when he's called out for his actions, but it's still hard to excuse these actions. Next is Kragger. Unlike Hero and Shyr, who have shades of gray and nuance to them, Kragger is a manipulator, a schemer, and only cares about his own wants and desires instead of the needs of his people. He interrogated Shyr not because he was concerned about the mission, but also just to drive a wedge between her and Hero so that he could have Hero to himself. Later on, Kragger held a vendetta against Shyr, convinced that Hero's death was completely her fault, and repeatedly tried to murder her before falling to his own death. While no mastermind, he was probably the most blatantly evil Thanagarian that we met during the series. Entering the bottom 5, we have Gorilla Grodd. Part of both the Secret Society and the Legion of Doom, Grodd was one of the bigger antagonists of the two Justice League series. But while he may have had more screen time than your average villain of the week, most of his plans weren't exactly diabolical. His first plan was trying to take over Central City. After that, we saw him use his psychic abilities to turn the Justice League against each other before attempting to capture and destroy them. His ultimate plan of turning all of humanity into apes was eventually revealed, and while that's pretty evil, it can't quite compare to our bottom four. Still, for all that Grodd did, being the leader of two different supervillain teams, we felt he deserved a decent spot. Just outside the podium are the infamous Justice Lords. While they are 6 different characters, we're grouping them all together because they all have the same goal: peace at all cost. This group was formed when this universe's Superman killed President Luthor as revenge for Luthor killing Flash. From there, the Justice Lords essentially became a police state, bringing in anyone who didn't follow the law and lobotomizing all the supervillains. They also wanted to bring this police state and so-called peace into another universe once they discovered it. The Justice Lords were so invested in their mission that the Alt-Supes was even willing to kill another universe's Flash just because he stood in their way. The only member you could argue as being not as evil as the others is Justice Lord Batman, since he helped the Justice League get back to their universe, but he was still compliant in his league's actions. You know what they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Earning the bronze medal of evil, we have Brainiac. While having plenty of screen time in Superman, the animated series, Unlimited really is where we saw Brainiac at his most powerful and most evil. Once he teamed up with Luthor and gained access to the technology of the Dark Heart, Brainiac nearly became unstoppable. If not for the Justice League, and the Flash especially, he and Lex would have absorbed the information of the entire universe before reshaping it to their will. Though it can be argued that Brainiac was just following his program to its extreme, Brainiac is still a cunning, calculating, and cold-hearted villain that manages to be a universal threat. Not an easy accomplishment. Getting the silver medal of evil is a super genius businessman, Lex Luthor. Ruthless, power-hungry, and eternally envious of Superman. Really, what isn't there to say about a villain like Lex freaking Luthor? Like with Brainiac, Luthor essentially took everything that was evil about him in Superman the Animated Series and took it to the next level. While a decent enough threat in the first series, throughout Season 2 of Unlimited, we saw Lex use his political campaign to play both Superman and Cadmus against each other, nearly destroying them both, along with the rest of the Justice League. Though Brainiac was technically more powerful than him, it was still Lex who convinced Brainiac to do more than just absorb information in the hopes of the two of them becoming new creators of the universe. Beyond his biggest evil schemes, Lex is just a bad dude in general, always willing to backstab or kill anyone who stands in his way, whether they're his own allies or not. But there are a couple of small things that keep Lex from being our most evil character. When Superman died, we actually saw Lex briefly comfort Lois, claiming that he would actually miss Superman. Then, in the series finale of Unlimited, it was Lex that defeated Darkseid, saving the world. But, given that it was Lex who accidentally resurrected Darkseid in the first place, these things don't amount to much, even if they are enough to keep him from the very bottom. Finally, our gold medal of evil is going to none other than Darkseid. Come on, who else was it gonna be? Lex might have been the overarching villain of the two Justice League series, but Darkseid is just on a whole other level in terms of power and evilness. Even focusing on just his Justice League and Unlimited appearances, Darkseid is shown to be cruel and completely heartless, only caring about reshaping the universe to his will using the anti-life equation. Even when Superman was, reluctantly, willing to help save Apocalypse, Darkseid still tried to betray him. Later on, after his resurrection, Darkseid vowed to not only kill Supes, but to also make sure that he and everyone he loved suffered dearly before his death. He remained the true villain until the very end, and honestly, there really is no one more deserving of the title of most evil Justice League character than him. Alright guys, that's the list. Let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.